The first mirrors were not made so people could check their hair. They were buried with the dead, carried by the powerful, feared as magical objects, and polished from materials that could take days of labor to produce one imperfect reflection. So why did humans work so hard to see themselves? And what happened once the reflection stopped disappearing? Look into a mirror for a second. You probably did it this morning without thinking. Maybe you checked your hair. Maybe you inspected a spot that absolutely was not there yesterday. Maybe you looked for 2 seconds, felt vaguely disappointed by the entire situation, and moved on with your life. But that tiny ordinary action is historically bizarre. For most of our species' existence, humans could not see their own faces clearly whenever they wanted. Other people knew what you looked like. Your family knew. Your friends knew. Every stranger you met knew. But you did not. You knew your hands because they were always in front of you. You knew your legs, your chest, your shadow, and the blurry shape of your nose at the edge of your vision. You knew your face through touch. You knew it through the reactions of other people. But the face everyone else saw every day was, to you, mostly an idea. Then, one day, somewhere in the deep human past, somebody leaned over still water and saw a person staring back. The person moved when they moved. Blinking happened at exactly the same time. Reached toward the surface, and the stranger reached back, touched the water, and their entire face shattered into ripples. That must have been one of the strangest experiences available to an early human. Not because our ancestors lacked self-awareness, they almost certainly understood that they were individuals long before anyone manufactured a mirror. But understanding that you exist and seeing your own face as an object are not the same thing. One is lived from the inside, the other is what everybody else sees. And mirrors created a bridge between those two worlds. Before we get to polished stone, bronze discs, secretive Venetian glassmakers, and the chemical process behind the mirror in your bathroom, we need to understand something surprisingly basic. A mirror is not defined by glass. Glass is only the transparent support used in most modern mirrors. The thing doing the reflecting is usually the thin metallic layer behind it. At the most basic level, a mirror is a surface smooth enough to send light back in an orderly way. Light strikes every object around you and reflects. That is how you see anything. But a rough wall sends those reflected rays in many directions. The wall is visible, but it does not assemble those rays into a recognizable image. A very smooth surface reflects them in a much more organized pattern. Your eyes receive that pattern, your brain traces it backward, and suddenly there appears to be another room, another body, another you behind the surface. There is not, obviously, unless your mirror is unusually expensive and your apartment has a serious architectural problem. But the illusion is powerful because the light reaching your eyes behaves as though it came from a space behind the mirror. Nature produces versions of this effect constantly. Still water, wet stone, ice, the polished surface of certain minerals. Even a dark animal eye can hold a tiny reflection if you get close enough. Although trying this with a large predator is an extremely committed way to learn optics. Water was almost certainly humanity's first mirror, but water is a terrible personal grooming device. It moves. Wind breaks the image. The angle has to be right. You need enough light. You also have to kneel over a pond while hoping nothing inside the pond has developed an interest in your face. So the first real technological step was not inventing reflection. Nature had already handled that. The step was making reflection portable. Stable, controllable, something you could hold in your hand and use again tomorrow. Some of the earliest known manufactured mirrors were made from obsidian, a dark volcanic glass created when lava cools rapidly. Obsidian can fracture into edges sharp enough to cut skin, which made it valuable for blades. But when one face is ground flat and polished carefully, that same black material can produce a surprisingly clear reflection. At Neolithic sites in Anatolia, including Çatalhöyük, archaeologists have found polished obsidian objects interpreted as mirrors. Some examples date to roughly the 7th millennium BC. That means people were intentionally manufacturing reflective objects more than 8,000 years ago. And making one was not a casual afternoon project. Obsidian is hard. The surface had to be flattened through abrasion, then polished with progressively finer material until thousands of microscopic irregularities were reduced enough to form an image. Experimental attempts suggest that producing a convincing obsidian mirror requires serious time, technique, and patience. Imagine spending days grinding a black rock just so it can show you a dark, slightly imperfect version of your face. no electricity, no power tools, no online tutorial titled 5 Easy Steps to Neolithic Self-Discovery. Just stone, abrasive material, water, pressure, and the belief that the result was worth the labor. That labor tells us something. A reflection was valuable, maybe practically valuable for grooming, body decoration, wound inspection, or removing something from your eye before eye care consisted mainly of suffering. But these mirrors appear in ritual and burial contexts too. They were not necessarily treated like simple household tools. A surface that could create another person inside a stone would have carried meanings we can only partly reconstruct. Think about what an obsidian mirror looks like. It is dark even before the image appears. Your face emerges from blackness. Move away, and it vanishes. Tilt the stone, and sunlight flashes from it. In a world without photographs, screens, or artificial light, this would not feel like a cheap bathroom accessory. It would feel alive. But obsidian had limitations. It was brittle. It was difficult to shape. Large flat pieces were hard to produce. And depending on the material and polish, the reflection could remain dim. Then humans became much better at metal. Copper can be hammered, cast, ground, and polished. Bronze, an alloy usually made from copper and tin, can produce a durable reflective surface too. Across ancient Egypt, the Near East, the Mediterranean, East Asia, and other regions, metal mirrors became some of the most important reflective objects of the ancient world. These were not sheets of glass. They were discs of polished metal. One side reflected the viewer. The other could carry handles, inscriptions, animals, gods, geometric patterns, or scenes from mythology. And because exposed metal tarnishes and scratches, keeping a mirror reflective required maintenance. The image was not something you simply owned. It was something you had to preserve. In ancient Egypt, mirrors were closely connected with grooming, cosmetics, status, death, and religion. Archaeologists have found copper alloy and bronze mirror discs in burials, sometimes alongside razors, tweezers, cosmetic containers, and other personal objects. The message seems fairly clear. The dead might require their grooming equipment. Apparently the afterlife was eternal, but turning up unprepared was still unacceptable. Some Egyptian mirror handles incorporated symbols associated with Hathor, a goddess connected with fertility, protection, and the sun. A polished disc itself could resemble the glowing solar disc, so a mirror was not merely an object for checking eyeliner. It could connect the face, the sun, divine power, rebirth, and the continuation of identity after death. This is where mirrors begin doing something they will do for the rest of history. They operate on two levels at once. They are practical objects, and they are metaphors waiting to happen. A mirror tells the truth, but it can also deceive. It reveals, but the image is untouchable. It appears to contain another world, but the world has no depth you can enter. It copies everything instantly, yet keeps nothing after you leave. That combination is irresistible to religion, magic, philosophy, and anyone who has ever written a dramatic poem while experiencing extremely intense feelings. Across the ancient Mediterranean, polished bronze mirrors became personal possessions and decorated artworks. Etruscan craftspeople produced thousands of bronze mirrors, often polishing one face and engraving elaborate mythological scenes on the back. The owner looked at their own face on one side, and gods, heroes, marriages, births, and prophecies on the other. Self-image and mythology were physically joined in the same object. Greek and Roman writers filled stories with reflective surfaces. The most famous is Narcissus, who sees his image in water and becomes trapped by his desire for the person he cannot reach. The story is often summarized as "man looks at himself too much," which is accurate in the way that summarizing an earthquake as "the floor had a problem" is accurate. It is really about image, identity, desire, and the impossible distance between a person and the version of that person they can see. The Romans also used metal mirrors, and small glass mirrors existed in the ancient world. But glass alone is not a great mirror. A transparent pane reflects some light from its front surface, which is why you can see your face in a dark window at night. During the day, light coming through from the other side overwhelms that weak reflection. To make glass function as a strong mirror, you need a reflective layer behind it or attached to it. Early glass-backed mirrors were small and imperfect. Glassmaking itself was difficult. Producing a flat, clear, undistorted sheet was even harder. If the glass curved, bubbled, rippled, or varied in thickness, the image warped. Your face might stretch, shrink, bend, or develop proportions that would make a modern beauty filter file for unemployment. For centuries, Polished metal remained the dependable solution. Bronze mirrors spread across vast regions. Across East Asia, Chinese-derived bronze mirror traditions developed into major artistic, political, and religious practices. The reflective face was polished, while the back could display cosmological patterns, deities, animals, inscriptions, or symbols of good fortune. Some mirrors were buried in tombs. Some were exchanged as political or diplomatic gifts. Mirrors produced from related designs have even helped researchers understand relationships between ancient communities. A mirror could therefore do far more than show a face. It could prove wealth, carry religious protection, seal friendship, advertise technical skill, travel across borders, and accompany someone into death. That sounds like a lot of responsibility for an object now used mainly to confirm that toothpaste has somehow reached your shirt. But ancient mirrors were expensive concentrations of labor and material. Not everyone owned one. A clear personal reflection was unevenly distributed. The powerful saw themselves in polished metal. Many ordinary people still relied on water, bowls, dark surfaces, and the occasional reflective household object. This inequality matters because mirrors alter behavior. When you know exactly how you appear, you can deliberately manage that appearance. Hair, cosmetics, jewelry, posture, facial expression, clothing, and body decoration become easier to inspect and adjust. A mirror turns appearance into a project. Without one, you still care how you look. Humans decorated bodies long before manufactured mirrors. People had friends, family, and communities capable of saying, "You missed a spot," presumably with varying levels of kindness. But frequent private access to your image changes the relationship. You no longer depend entirely on other people's eyes. You can inspect yourself before they do. That sounds liberating, and it is. It is also the beginning of a problem. Once you can see yourself as other people see you, you can begin judging yourself as you imagine they might. The mirror gives control, but it also creates surveillance. The observer and the observed become the same person. You stand alone in a room, and somehow there is still an audience. This psychological power helps explain why reflective objects became associated with danger and magic in so many traditions. Mirrors appeared in divination. They were used in protective rituals and magical medicine. They were imagined as portals, truth-telling devices, soul traps, tools for communicating across worlds, and objects that could expose what ordinary sight missed. To a modern person, this may sound superstitious. But consider the experience before mirrors were common. A metal disc produces a moving double that cannot be touched. A dark surface shows a face inside itself. A glass object appears to open a room behind the wall. Even now, with physics textbooks and factory-made mirrors, people still feel uneasy looking into one in a dark room. Remove the electricity and add several centuries of folklore, and suddenly the ghost story is doing most of the work by itself. During the medieval period, metal mirrors remained common across many parts of the world. In Islamic regions, cast bronze mirrors could be decorated with zodiac signs and mythological imagery, and used in divination or magical medicine. In Europe, small mirrors might be enclosed in cases, worn, carried, or incorporated into luxury objects. Glass mirrors existed, but they were usually limited by the difficulty of producing good flat glass and attaching a consistent reflective backing. Then, Venice entered the story. By the medieval and Renaissance periods, Venetian glassmaking had become famous across Europe. The industry was organized, regulated, and eventually concentrated heavily on the island of Murano. Venetian authorities guarded techniques because glass was not merely art, it was economic power. Glassmakers improved methods for creating clearer, more refined glass. Mirror makers then combined glass with a metallic backing. A process using a tin-mercury amalgam was recorded in Venice in the early 16th century. A thin sheet of tin was spread out, mercury was applied, and glass was carefully placed over the metallic layer. The mercury helped create a bright reflective backing attached to the glass. It also exposed workers to mercury, which is poisonous. So the Renaissance mirror achieved two classic human goals at once. It made the rich look fantastic and the craftspeople dangerously ill. The result, however, was extraordinary compared with many earlier mirrors. Glass protected the reflective metal from direct touching and scratching. Clearer, flatter panes allowed brighter and more detailed images. The reflection appeared behind a smooth, transparent surface, giving it depth and stability. For wealthy Europeans, a high-quality Venetian mirror became an object of obsession. And obsession was understandable because these mirrors were brutally expensive. Making flat glass required fuel, skilled labor, controlled furnaces, careful cooling, grinding, polishing, and a difficult backing process. Large mirrors were especially challenging. A defect could ruin an enormous amount of work. Transport could finish what the furnace failed to destroy. One careless movement, and months of skill became a very expensive pile of sharp regret. Venice protected the knowledge behind this industry. Glassmaking secrets were tightly guarded, and the movement of skilled workers could become politically sensitive. Other states wanted the technology because whoever could manufacture good mirrors could sell luxury, prestige, architecture, and a completely new experience of interior space. A large mirror does not merely reflect a person. It reflects light. It makes a room appear larger. It duplicates candles, windows, decorations, people, and wealth. Put enough mirrors in a palace, and the building begins congratulating itself from every direction. In the late 17th century, French makers developed methods for casting plate glass by pouring molten glass onto a metal surface and rolling it flatter. This allowed the production of larger panes than many earlier blown glass methods. Larger glass meant larger windows meant more light, and larger mirror plates meant wealthy people could finally inspect an alarming percentage of themselves at once. That changed fashion and social performance. A small hand mirror shows a face. A full-length mirror shows posture, clothing, silhouette, movement, and the complete social message a body sends when it enters a room. The person in front of the mirror could rehearse a smile, a bow, a pose, the angle of a hat, the graceful entrance that looks effortless after being practiced 37 times in private. Mirrors became part of architecture, furniture, dressing rooms, and elite social ritual. They also became symbols of vanity. Religious and moral critics worried about excessive self-regard. Artists used mirrors to represent pride, truth, temptation, mortality, sexuality, knowledge, and deception. The object that seemed to show reality became one of culture's favorite symbols for illusion. And there is a reason for that. A mirror is accurate but not neutral. It reverses the visible arrangement. It depends on lighting. It depends on angle. Curved surfaces distort. Old glass adds ripples. Polished metal changes color and brightness. Even a perfect modern mirror shows only the surface available from one position at one moment. Yet humans repeatedly treated the reflection as a verdict. Beautiful, ugly, young, old, healthy, tired, acceptable, unacceptable. The mirror did not invent those categories, but it gave people a private machine for applying them over and over again. The next major transformation was chemical and industrial. For centuries, mercury-tin backing remained important in European mirror production. During the 19th century, safer chemical silvering processes using silver compounds became widely adopted. Instead of pressing glass onto an amalgam of tin and mercury, manufacturers could deposit a thin metallic silver layer directly onto the back of the glass. Protective coatings helped preserve it. At the same time, industrial glass production improved. Factories became capable of making larger, flatter, more consistent sheets. Grinding and polishing became mechanized. Mirrors gradually moved out of palaces and wealthy dressing rooms and into middle-class homes, shops, hotels, theaters, elevators, vehicles, and eventually almost every bathroom built by a person who did not enjoy shaving through intuition. This was the real revolution. Humans had manufactured mirrors for thousands of years, but only recently did constant access to a clear reflection become ordinary. Think about the difference. An ancient person might see their face in calm water, a rare polished object, or a valuable household mirror shared with others. You can see your reflection before breakfast, in the bathroom, in a dark phone screen, in a shop window, in a car mirror, in an elevator, in a laptop camera, and accidentally in the front-facing camera when it opens from a deeply unflattering angle. The mirror escaped the frame. Modern cities are covered in reflective surfaces. Glass towers duplicate the sky. Cars require mirrors for safety. Telescopes use mirrors to study objects billions of light years away. Microscopes, lasers, cameras, medical instruments, solar systems, and scientific devices depend on controlled reflection. A technology that began with a face in stone became one of humanity's major tools for investigating everything except itself. But the face remains the center of the story. In the 20th and 21st centuries, photography, film, television, video calls, and social media multiplied the reflected self. A mirror shows you now. A photograph stores you. A camera transmits you. A social platform asks you to select, edit, publish, compare, and measure the response. The ancient mirror disappeared when you stepped away. The modern digital reflection follows you. It can be copied, judged, filtered, shared, archived, recognized by software, placed beside millions of other faces in a competition nobody remembers agreeing to enter. And this creates a strange reversal. Early humans worked incredibly hard to stabilize a reflection. Modern humans sometimes work incredibly hard to escape one. We avoid mirrors on bad days, we retake photographs, we change lighting, we learn our preferred angle. We compare the face in the mirror with the face in a photograph and experience the quiet betrayal of discovering that they are not arranged exactly the same way. We know our reflection better than almost any human population before us, and many of us are still not entirely sure what we look like. Psychologists and biologists have used mirrors to study self-recognition in children and animals. The famous Mark-style experiments ask whether a subject uses the reflected image to investigate something placed on its own body. Some great apes, dolphins, elephants, and a limited number of other animals have shown behaviors interpreted as mirror self-recognition. Human children do not arrive with this ability fully operational. It develops during early childhood. But passing a mirror test is not the same as possessing a complete self, and failing one does not prove the absence of awareness. Vision may not be the dominant sense for every species. Motivation matters, experience matters. The mirror reveals something, but like every mirror in history, it does not reveal everything. Humans were people before they could manufacture their own reflections. They loved, planned, grieved, decorated themselves, recognized relatives, defended reputations, and understood social identity. The mirror did not create the self. What it created was a new relationship with the self. It allowed a person to become both subject and object, the one who looks and the thing being inspected, the private individual and the public image. That is why the history of mirrors is not really the history of one invention. There was no single morning when one genius announced, "I have invented seeing your face." There was still water, then polished stone, then copper and bronze, then decorated discs carried by the wealthy and buried with the dead, then small glass experiments, then improved glassmaking, metallic backing, mercury and tin, cast plate, chemical silvering, industrial factories, cameras, screens, and finally a world where your own face can appear more often in one day than many ancestors saw theirs in months. Each step solved a practical problem. Make the image brighter, make it flatter, make it larger, make it portable, make it durable, make it cheaper, make it available to everyone. But each solution created a psychological consequence. More control, more comparison, more self-knowledge, more vanity, more anxiety, more freedom to decide how the world would see you, more pressure to keep deciding. So how did humans invent mirrors? Slowly, across thousands of years, by noticing what still water could do, by learning that stone could be polished, by discovering that metal could hold a brighter image, by mastering glass, by coating its back with reflective material, by turning a rare sacred object into an industrial product so common that we barely register its existence. But the deeper invention was not glass or silver. It was the stable external self. Before mirrors, your face mostly belonged to other people. They carried it in their memories. They responded to it. They described it. They loved it, feared it, trusted it, judged it, and watched it age. You inhabited that face, but you could not summon it whenever you wanted. Now you can. You can stand before a sheet of glass and see the arrangement of features that the rest of the world calls you. The image feels immediate, objective, ordinary, but it is the endpoint of volcanic stone, metal casting, religious symbolism, secret workshops, and a human curiosity so persistent that we spent millennia teaching matter how to look back. And tonight, when you pass a mirror, try something. Stop for 1 second before checking your hair, your skin, your clothes, or whatever tiny flaw your brain has generously volunteered to investigate. Look at the object itself. You are standing in front of a machine that turns vision around, a surface that gives you the face everybody else sees, a technology that made self-observation private, repeatable, and almost impossible to escape. The person in the glass is not another person. It is not a soul trapped behind the wall. It is not magic. It is light returning in an organized pattern. But the fact that humans learned to capture that pattern, carry it, enlarge it, perfect it, and surround themselves with it, that part is still genuinely magical.